Hey guys! Tonight, we're going to start with something darker. Disease, poverty, suffocating smog that could kill you in your sleep. We're diving into a world that existed just over a century ago, but forget the romantic period dramas you've seen on Netflix, with their perfect costumes and charming love stories. The truth is, you probably wouldn't survive a single week in Victorian England. So, before we relax, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. I always find it fascinating to see who's joining us from different corners of the world. Now, dim those lights, maybe turn on a fan for some gentle background noise, and let's embark on this journey together. Congratulations, you've just woken up in 1847. The good news? You're alive. The bad news? Your bed is a thin straw mattress crawling with lice, fleas, and bedbugs that have been feasting on your blood all night. There's no memory foam, no Egyptian cotton sheets, no down comforter. Just a rough wool blanket that hasn't been washed in months and smells like a mixture of sweat, smoke, and something that might be rotting meat. You wake to the sound of church bells clanging through the thick, yellow fog that perpetually hangs over London like a suffocating shroud. Your home, if you can call it that, is a single room in a crumbling tenement building. The walls are damp with condensation and black with mold. There are no windows, just a small opening covered with oiled paper that lets in a sickly, filtered light. The floor is bare wooden planks with gaps so wide you can see down to the room below, where another family of 6 is trying to survive in conditions just as desperate as yours. The air is thick and hard to breathe. There's no ventilation system, no air conditioning, no way to escape the mixture of coal smoke, human waste, rotting food, and industrial chemicals that creates the permanent haze hanging over the city. Every breath burns your lungs slightly. Your throat is always scratchy, and you've developed a persistent cough that never quite goes away, just like everyone else in your neighborhood. You share this single room with your spouse, 3 children, and possibly a lodger or 2, because the extra shilling they pay helps keep your family from complete starvation. Privacy doesn't exist. Everyone sleeps, eats, dresses, and lives in this one cramped space. The children are huddled together on a pile of rags in the corner, their faces pale and thin, already showing signs of malnutrition despite their young age. As you sit up, your joints ache, not from old age necessarily, but from years of hard physical labor, poor nutrition, and the constant dampness that seeps into your bones. Your back is permanently bent from hunching over machinery or carrying heavy loads. Your hands are rough, scarred, and stained from whatever industrial work you do to earn your meager wages. The morning ritual begins, and it's nothing like stepping into a warm shower. Water is precious and often contaminated. You might have a small basin of cold water to splash on your face, if you're lucky. Most days you simply wipe your face with a dirty rag and consider yourself clean enough. Soap is expensive, and hot water requires fuel you can't afford. Your clothes are the same ones you wore yesterday, and the day before that, and the day before that. You own exactly 1 set of clothing, maybe 2 if you're fortunate. They're made of rough, scratchy fabric that chafes your skin. They haven't been properly washed in weeks because washing requires water, soap, fuel for heating, and time you don't have. The smell of unwashed bodies and clothes mingles with all the other odors in your crowded room. Breakfast, if you can afford it, might be a piece of stale bread and perhaps some weak tea. But more often, breakfast is nothing at all, because you need to save what little money you have for the evening meal. Your stomach gnaws at itself with hunger, a feeling so constant you've almost stopped noticing it. The children whimper softly, not bothering to ask for food anymore because they know there isn't any. The walk to work takes you through streets that would horrify any modern person. There are no paved roads in your neighborhood, just muddy paths filled with horse manure, human waste, and garbage that's never collected. Open sewers run down the middle of the streets, carrying a toxic mixture of industrial waste and human excrement. The smell is overwhelming, but you've learned to breathe through your mouth and keep walking. Dead animals lie rotting in the gutters, cats, dogs, sometimes even horses that died from exhaustion and were simply left where they fell. Children play around these corpses, having no other space to play, no parks or playgrounds, no safe areas away from the filth and danger. The buildings lean precariously against each other, many of them ready to collapse at any moment. Windows are broken and never repaired. Doors hang askew on broken hinges. Everything is black with soot from the countless factory chimneys that belch thick, poisonous smoke into the air 24 hours a day. If you're a man, you might work in a factory for 12 to 16 hours a day. The machines are loud, dangerous, and completely unguarded. Workers regularly lose fingers, hands, or entire limbs to the grinding gears and spinning wheels. There are no safety regulations, no workers' compensation, no sick leave. If you're injured, you simply stop earning money and your family starves. The air in the factory is thick with cotton fibers, metal dust, or chemical fumes, depending on what's being manufactured. Your lungs are slowly being destroyed with every breath, but you have no choice but to keep working. Black lung disease, tuberculosis, and other respiratory ailments are so common, they're considered normal parts of life. If you're a woman, your options are even more limited and dangerous. You might work in the same factories as men, but for half the wages. Or you might take in piecework at home, sewing clothes or making matchboxes for 18 hours a day in the dim light of a single candle, destroying your eyesight and developing a permanently hunched back from bending over your work. Many women resort to prostitution simply to survive, selling their bodies on the dangerous streets where Jack the Ripper-type killers are a very real threat. The police don't care about protecting poor women. Violence against women is expected, accepted, and rarely punished. Children as young as 5 or 6 work alongside adults. They crawl under dangerous machinery to clean or repair it while it's still running. They work in coal mines, their small bodies perfect for squeezing through narrow tunnels. They climb up inside factory chimneys to clean them, often getting stuck and suffocating. Child labor isn't just accepted, it's essential for family survival. Education is a luxury that doesn't exist for the poor. Children who should be learning to read and write are instead learning how to survive in a world that sees them as disposable. Many never learn to read at all, keeping them trapped in poverty for their entire short lives. The workday ends when the sun goes down, not because of any labor laws, but because candles and oil lamps are too expensive to light the factories. You stumble home in the dark, exhausted beyond measure, your body aching from the repetitive motions and dangerous conditions. At home, you face the same crowded, airless room you left that morning. If you're very lucky, there might be a small fire in the grate, burning whatever scraps of wood or coal you could find. But fuel is expensive, and many nights you simply huddle together for warmth, sharing body heat under that single thin blanket. Dinner might be a watery soup made from potato peels and bones if you can afford it. More often, it's just bread and water, or sometimes nothing at all. Malnutrition is so widespread that stunted growth, rickets, and other deficiency diseases are visible everywhere you look. When illness strikes, and it will strike often, there's no calling a doctor. Medical care is for the wealthy, not for people like you. Doctors are expensive, mysterious figures who live in a completely different world from yours. They wear clean clothes, ride in carriages, and charge fees that would feed your family for a month. Instead of medical care, you rely on folk remedies, patent medicines filled with alcohol and opium, and prayer. When someone in your family gets sick, you can only watch and hope they're strong enough to survive whatever is attacking their weakened body. Cholera sweeps through your neighborhood regularly, killing hundreds of people in a matter of days. The disease spreads through contaminated water, but no one understands this yet. People believe it's caused by bad air, moral failing, or divine punishment for being poor. Typhoid, tuberculosis, smallpox, and dozens of other diseases are constant threats. Child mortality is so high that many parents don't bother naming their babies until they're sure they'll survive their first year. Losing half your children to disease is considered normal, expected, just part of life. Women die in childbirth at horrifying rates. There's no prenatal care, no sterile conditions, no understanding of infection or proper hygiene. Giving birth means risking death every single time, and many women don't survive to see their babies grow up. Dental care doesn't exist for the poor. Your teeth rot out of your head, causing constant pain and making it even harder to eat the little food you can afford. By the time you're 30, if you live that long, you might have only a few black, broken teeth left. Mental illness is completely misunderstood. People with depression, anxiety, or other mental health conditions are often locked away in asylums that are more like prisons. The treatments are barbaric: cold water baths, restraints, isolation, and sometimes lobotomy. Many people with mental illness simply disappear, forgotten by a society that has no understanding of how to help them. Injuries that would be minor today become life-threatening infections. A cut on your hand from a factory machine might become gangrenous, requiring amputation if you're lucky, or death if you're not. Broken bones heal crooked because there's no proper medical setting. Burns from factory accidents leave permanent scars and disabilities. Opium is widely available and often the only pain relief accessible to poor people. Addiction is common, but it's not understood as a medical condition. It's seen as a moral failing, another sign that poor people are inherently weak and deserving of their suffering. The average life expectancy for someone in your social class is around 35 years, not because people age faster, but because disease, injury, malnutrition, and exhaustion kill them young. If you make it to 40, you're considered elderly. If you make it to 50, you're practically ancient. Hospitals exist, but they're places where poor people go to die, not to get better. They're overcrowded, unsanitary, and staffed by untrained volunteers. Most people prefer to die at home rather than in these death houses that smell of carbolic acid and human suffering. The wealthy have access to better medical care, but even their doctors don't understand germ theory, proper sanitation, or effective treatments. They might prescribe mercury for various ailments which often kills the patient faster than the original disease. Pregnancy is dangerous for women of all classes, but especially for poor women who are malnourished and overworked. Many women have 8, 10, or 12 pregnancies, hoping that a few children will survive to adulthood and be able to care for them in old age. The class system in Victorian England isn't just about having more or less money. It's a rigid hierarchy that determines every aspect of your life, from where you can live, to whom you can marry, to what kind of work you're allowed to do. As a member of the working poor, you exist at the very bottom of this system, barely considered human by those above you. The wealthy live in a completely different world. While you're crammed into a single room with your entire family, they live in mansions with dozens of rooms they rarely even enter. They have servants to dress them, cook for them, clean for them, and attend to their every need. These servants are people from your social class who are slightly better off, but they're still treated as inferior beings. The middle class looks down on you with a mixture of fear and disgust. They see your poverty as proof of moral failing, evidence that you're lazy, drunken, or inherently inferior. They support laws that make your life even harder, believing that suffering will somehow motivate you to improve yourself, even though the system gives you no opportunity to do so. Social mobility is virtually impossible. You were born poor, your children will be born poor, and their children will be born poor. The idea that hard work leads to success is a myth that the wealthy use to justify their privilege and your suffering. No matter how hard you work, no matter how long your hours, you will never earn enough to escape poverty. Education, which might offer some hope of advancement, is completely out of reach. There are no public schools, no free education, no programs to help poor children learn. School costs money that your family desperately needs for food and shelter. Even if you could somehow afford to send your children to school, they need to work to help support the family. Women face additional restrictions and dangers. If you're a woman, you have no legal rights. You cannot vote, cannot own property, cannot sign contracts, cannot even control your own children if your husband decides otherwise. Domestic violence is legal and common. Marital rape doesn't even have a name because a woman's body is considered her husband's property. The justice system is designed to protect the wealthy and punish the poor. Stealing bread because your children are starving can result in deportation to Australia or even death. Meanwhile, wealthy men who cheat their business partners or exploit their workers face no consequences at all. Police exist primarily to protect property, not people. They're more likely to arrest you for being poor in the wrong neighborhood than to investigate crimes against you. Violence is so common in poor areas that it's simply accepted as part of life. Religion offers little comfort. The established churches preach that your suffering is God's will, that poverty is punishment for sin, and that your reward will come in the afterlife if you accept your miserable conditions without complaint. Some preach that the rich are blessed by God and deserve their wealth, while the poor are cursed and deserve their suffering. Entertainment for the poor is limited and often dangerous. Public executions are popular spectacles where crowds gather to watch people die. Blood sports like bear baiting and dog fighting provide violent excitement. Gin houses offer temporary escape from reality. But alcohol addiction often makes difficult lives even worse. Marriage is often more about survival than love. Women marry because they need financial support, and men marry because they need someone to cook, clean, and care for their children. Divorce is virtually impossible and incredibly expensive, so couples are trapped together even in abusive or loveless relationships. Children are expected to contribute to family income from an early age. There's no concept of childhood as a protected time for play and learning. Children are small adults who need to work to help their families survive. Playing is a luxury that poor families can't afford. The London air you breathe every day is literally poisonous. The combination of coal smoke from thousands of fireplaces and factory chimneys creates a toxic fog so thick you sometimes can't see your hand in front of your face. This isn't just uncomfortable, it's deadly. Thousands of people die every year from respiratory diseases caused by the polluted air. The Thames River, which should be a source of clean water, is instead an open sewer. All of London's human waste flows directly into the river, along with industrial chemicals, dead animals, and garbage. The smell during summer is so overwhelming that Parliament has to soak the curtains in lime just to make the sessions bearable. This poisoned water often makes its way back into the drinking supply. Your neighborhood has no proper sanitation system. Human waste is collected in cesspits that overflow regularly, contaminating everything around them. Night soil men come occasionally to empty these pits, but they dump the contents in fields just outside the city, where it poisons the groundwater and creates breeding grounds for disease. The streets are death traps. There are no traffic laws, no sidewalks, no street lighting. Horse-drawn carriages race through crowded streets, trampling pedestrians regularly. Dead horses are left to rot where they fall, creating breeding grounds for rats and disease. The constant traffic turns the mud and waste into a toxic soup that splashes on everyone and everything. Your tenement building is structurally unsound. It was built quickly and cheaply to house as many people as possible in the smallest space. The foundation is sinking, the walls are cracking, and the roof leaks constantly. Fires are common because of open flames from candles and fireplaces, and when they start, they spread quickly through the dry, overcrowded buildings. Rats and other vermin are everywhere. They're not just nuisances, they carry diseases like typhus and plague. They contaminate food supplies, damage clothing and furniture, and their droppings create additional health hazards. Cats are kept to control the rat population, but there are always more rats than cats. Water is scarce and dangerous. There are public pumps in some neighborhoods, but the water often comes from contaminated sources. Many people have to buy water from vendors who may or may not be selling clean water. Boiling water requires fuel you can't afford, so you often drink contaminated water and hope for the best. Food preservation is primitive and often fails. There's no refrigeration, so meat spoils quickly. Milk is often watered down and contaminated. Bread is sometimes made with sawdust or chalk to increase profits. Food poisoning is common, and there's no way to know if your food is safe until after you've eaten it. Lighting is dangerous and inadequate. Candles and oil lamps create fire hazards, but they're also expensive. Many families simply go to bed when the sun sets because they can't afford artificial light. Working or reading by candlelight damages eyesight and creates additional fire risks. Heating is inadequate and expensive. Coal is costly, wood is scarce, and many families simply endure cold that would be considered unbearable today. Frostbite and hypothermia are common in winter. People burn anything they can find, furniture, books, even their own clothing, just to create a little warmth. The noise is constant and overwhelming. Factory whistles blow at all hours. Machinery clanks and grinds. Animals make noise in the streets. People shout to be heard over the din. There's no quiet space, no escape from the constant assault on your senses. Industrial accidents are frequent and often fatal. Factory explosions, building collapses, and chemical spills happen regularly. There are no safety regulations, no emergency response systems, no compensation for victims. When disaster strikes, workers are simply replaced by others desperate enough to take the dangerous jobs. Crime in Victorian London isn't just common, it's often the only way to survive. Theft, robbery, and violence are daily realities in your neighborhood. Children learn to pick pockets before they learn to read. Women turn to prostitution not by choice, but because it's often the only way to feed their families. Men resort to burglary, robbery, and worse because legitimate work doesn't pay enough to live on. The police force is new, understaffed, and primarily concerned with protecting the wealthy. In your poor neighborhood, police rarely appear unless there's been a murder, and even then, they might not investigate very thoroughly if the victim was poor. Street violence is so common that it's barely worth reporting. Public hangings are regular entertainment. Crowds gather to watch criminals die, treating executions like festivals. Children are brought to watch, supposedly to learn moral lessons, but really because death is one of the few free entertainments available. The crowds cheer, sell food, and make a party atmosphere out of human suffering. Domestic violence is legal and expected. Men are considered the absolute rulers of their households, with the right to discipline their wives and children however they see fit. Women who are beaten by their husbands have no legal recourse. If they try to leave, they have nowhere to go and no way to support themselves. Child abuse is widespread and rarely punished. Children are considered property, not people with rights. They can be beaten, starved, overworked, or sold into labor contracts that are barely different from slavery. Orphaned children often live on the streets, forming gangs for protection and survival. Sexual violence against women is common and rarely prosecuted. Poor women, especially prostitutes, are considered fair game for any man who wants to assault them. The legal system assumes that women are lying about rape unless they can prove otherwise, which is nearly impossible. Debtor's prison is a very real threat. If you can't pay your debts, you can be imprisoned until you do pay them, which creates an impossible situation since you can't earn money while you're in prison. Entire families are sometimes imprisoned for debt, including small children who have done nothing wrong. Mental illness is treated as criminal behavior. People who behave strangely are often arrested and thrown into asylums that are more like prisons. There's no understanding of mental health, no treatment beyond restraints and isolation. Many mentally ill people are simply beaten or killed for acting differently. The workhouse system is designed to be so miserable that only the truly desperate will enter. Families are separated, children are taken from their parents, and everyone is put to work in conditions that are deliberately harsh. The workhouse diet is designed to be barely sufficient to prevent death from starvation. Street gangs control many neighborhoods. These aren't modern gangs with sophisticated organizations, but groups of desperate people who band together for protection and to commit crimes. They fight territorial wars, extort money from local businesses, and prey on anyone they perceive as weak. Corruption is endemic throughout the system. Police can be bought, judges take bribes, politicians sell their votes to the highest bidder. Justice is for sale, and poor people can't afford to buy it. Wealthy criminals walk free, while poor people are executed for minor crimes. Body snatching is a profitable business. Medical schools need corpses for dissection, and they don't ask too many questions about where the bodies come from. Grave robbers dig up fresh corpses to sell, and some criminals graduate to murder when grave robbing doesn't provide enough supply. Child labor laws don't exist, so children work in the most dangerous conditions imaginable. They crawl through narrow mine shafts, operate dangerous machinery, and work with toxic chemicals. If they're injured or killed, they're simply replaced by other desperate children. Death is your constant companion in Victorian England. It lurks in every glass of water, every breath of air, every meal, every workplace, every pregnancy. The statistical reality is that you probably won't live to see your 40th birthday, and you'll watch most of your children die before they reach adulthood. Cholera epidemics sweep through London regularly, killing thousands in a matter of weeks. The disease causes violent diarrhea and vomiting that dehydrates victims so quickly they can die within hours of showing symptoms. Entire families are wiped out. Bodies pile up in the streets because there aren't enough coffins or grave diggers to handle the volume of death. Tuberculosis is even more deadly because it kills slowly. The disease wastes its victims away over months or years, filling their lungs with fluid until they literally drown in their own blood. It's highly contagious, spreading easily in the overcrowded, poorly ventilated tenements where poor families live. There's no treatment, no cure, no hope once you start coughing up blood. Smallpox leaves survivors permanently disfigured with deep scars covering their faces and bodies. Many go blind from the disease. Children who survive are often mentally disabled from the high fevers. The death rate is around 30%, but the suffering of survivors can be worse than death. Typhoid fever spreads through contaminated water and food. Victims suffer weeks of high fever, severe headaches, and delirium before either recovering or dying. Mary Mallon, known as Typhoid Mary, won't be identified as a carrier for decades, so the disease spreads mysteriously through communities, killing seemingly at random. Industrial diseases are creating new forms of slow death. Match factory workers develop phossy jaw from phosphorus poisoning, causing their jawbones to rot and glow in the dark. Miners develop black lung disease from inhaling coal dust. Factory workers are poisoned by lead, mercury, and dozens of other chemicals that slowly destroy their bodies. Pregnancy and childbirth are extremely dangerous. Women often die from infections, bleeding, or complications that would be easily treatable today. Many women go through 8, 10, or 12 pregnancies, losing half their children to disease, malnutrition, or accident. Infant mortality is so high that many families don't name their babies until they're sure they'll survive their first year. Malnutrition weakens everyone's immune system, making every disease more deadly. Rickets causes children's bones to grow deformed. Scurvy causes teeth to fall out and wounds to never heal. Pellagra causes skin lesions and mental deterioration. These diseases of poverty make poor people more vulnerable to every other health threat. Mental illness is completely misunderstood and brutally treated. People with depression, anxiety, or any behavioral differences are often locked in asylums where they're chained to walls, subjected to ice water baths, and left to rot in their own filth. Many develop additional mental health problems from the trauma of their treatment. Workplace accidents kill and maim workers regularly. Factory machines tear off limbs. Mine explosions bury workers alive. Construction accidents crush people under heavy materials. There are no safety regulations, no workers' compensation, no medical care for injured workers. If you're hurt, you simply stop earning money and your family faces starvation. Violence is another major cause of death. Street fights, domestic violence, criminal assaults, and public executions are all common. Men fight duels over minor insults. Women are murdered by their husbands with no legal consequences. Children are beaten to death by parents or employers. Even minor injuries can become fatal. A small cut can become infected and require amputation or cause death from sepsis. Broken bones heal crooked, causing permanent disability. Burns from cooking fires or industrial accidents often become infected and kill their victims slowly and painfully. Suicide is common but rarely discussed. People facing starvation, disease, or unbearable living conditions sometimes choose death over continued suffering. The Thames River claims many victims who see drowning as preferable to slow starvation or painful disease. Despite all these horrors, despite the overwhelming suffering and seemingly hopeless conditions, there were moments of beauty, connection, and hope that sustained the human spirit even in Victorian England's darkest corners. People found ways to laugh, to love, to create meaning, even in the midst of overwhelming hardship. Music echoed through the tenement buildings. Workers sang together to make their labor bearable, their voices rising above the clatter of machinery and the noise of the streets. Folk songs passed down through generations carried stories of better times and hopes for the future. Even in the worst conditions, people gathered to share songs that reminded them of their humanity. Love flourished despite the harsh circumstances. Couples found each other in the midst of poverty and chose to face their struggles together. Parents cherished their children fiercely, even knowing that many wouldn't survive to adulthood. Friendships formed between neighbors who shared their meager resources and supported each other through crisis after crisis. Small acts of kindness created ripples of hope. A neighbor sharing a bowl of soup with a hungry family. A mother caring for another woman's children when illness struck. Workers pooling their money to help a colleague injured in an accident. These gestures of compassion proved that human goodness could survive even in the worst conditions. Religion, despite its limitations and sometimes harsh judgments, also provided comfort for many. Church services offered a brief respite from daily struggles. Hymns and prayers gave people a sense of connection to something greater than their immediate suffering. The promise of a better life after death helped some endure their earthly trials. Education, though rare and precious, began to spread slowly. Some charitable organizations started schools for poor children. Adults taught themselves to read by candlelight after exhausting workdays. Knowledge was treasured because it represented hope for a different future, even if that future seemed impossibly distant. Reform movements were beginning to emerge. People were starting to organize, to demand better working conditions, to fight for political representation. These movements would eventually lead to the changes that improved life for working people, though progress was slow and hard-won. Art and literature flourished even in poverty. People told stories, created makeshift theaters, drew pictures with charcoal on walls. Creativity found ways to express itself even when resources were virtually non-existent. These cultural expressions preserved human dignity and imagination. The natural world provided moments of beauty and peace. Even in industrial London, people could sometimes glimpse the sky between buildings, watch birds flying overhead, or see wildflowers growing in vacant lots. These connections to nature reminded people that beauty still existed in the world. Festivals and celebrations marked important occasions and brought communities together. Christmas, Easter, harvest festivals, and local traditions provided brief escapes from daily hardship. People shared whatever they had, creating moments of joy and connection that strengthened community bonds. Children played despite their circumstances. They invented games with scraps of material, told each other stories, and found wonder in small things. Their laughter and imagination proved that the human spirit could remain unbroken even in the worst conditions. Gradually, very gradually, things began to improve. Better understanding of disease led to improved sanitation. Labor organizing led to shorter working hours and better wages. Educational opportunities slowly expanded. Women began to demand rights and recognition. These changes took decades, but they represented the beginning of progress toward the world we know today. As you drift off to sleep tonight, remember that you are the beneficiary of centuries of struggle and progress. The comfortable bed you're lying in, the clean water you drink, the medical care available to you, the education you received, the rights you enjoy, all of these were won through the suffering and sacrifice of people who lived through conditions like those in Victorian England. Their struggles were not meaningless. Their pain contributed to the better world you now inhabit. Their resilience, their hope, their refusal to give up despite overwhelming odds created the foundation for the life you now live. So rest peacefully, knowing that human beings have survived much worse than anything you're likely to face. We are stronger than we know, more resilient than we imagine, and capable of creating beauty and meaning even in the darkest circumstances. The Victorian era eventually gave way to better times, just as current difficulties will eventually pass. Progress is possible, hope is justified, and tomorrow will come, bringing new possibilities for growth, healing, and positive change. Sleep well and dream of the better world that countless generations of strugglers and dreamers have made possible for you.